Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Georges Soros, the well-known financier, philanthropist, the author of many books. The latest one is The Tragedy of the European Union. Welcome to the show, Mr. Soros. I want to begin with your reaction to the midterm elections in the US. You've been a funder of the Democrats for many years. What's your reaction to the
frankly, it's rather shocking for me because it's much worse than I expected, and it makes me reflect. And at the moment, I'm confused.
You're confused. Do you think Obama is going to be a lame duck president for the remaining 2 years? There's no other way?
He will rule mainly by executive order, which is, I'm very pleased because I think migration is an issue that needs to be attended to. But how the cooperation will work with the Republicans, in a way, I hope that something can actually be accomplished also on the legislative side.
Okay. Last question on this issue. Are you disappointed, like many Democrats, by Barack Obama?
I am actually, let's say, more supportive of Obama than most Democrats are, which is not necessarily saying a lot.
Okay. I want to get to the issue of Russia. You wrote a very powerful piece in the New York Review of Books. You say, among other things, I'm just going to quote you, Europe is facing a challenge from Russia to its very existence. Neither the European leaders nor their citizens are fully aware of this challenge. Aren't you overreacting?
No, I think that the European public is underreacting. And that's why I'm trying to explain to them the real danger that Russia represents, which is actually shocking because there's nothing much attractive about Putin regime. It is what I call a mafia state, and yet it is, first of all, very skillful and represents a military threat because Europe is not very well situated to defend itself. And even more shockingly, there are imitators. There are others in Europe that look to Russia as a role model. And that is where I think it shows that there's something fundamentally wrong and broken in the European Union. We have to recognize that the Union itself, which is a noble, well-intended experiment in international governance, has failed and has not delivered what it promised. And there's such degree of disappointment that even Russia can offer an alternative.
Who is looking up at Russia in Europe? Who do you have in mind? You say others are kind of trying to emulate what Putin is doing.
Well, there is Orban in Hungary has publicly declared that he regards Putin his role model. And there are others in neighboring countries. There's Farage in UKIP who says similar things, and Marine Le Pen in France, and there are a lot of people in Germany who find the idea of closer cooperation with Russia rather attractive.
But when you say existential threats, the very definition of that is that the existence of the EU is threatened by Vladimir Putin. Do you mean militarily, ideologically? What exactly do you mean?
Exactly both.
Militarily, you think Russia could wage war and win against the European Union?
Well, Russia is waging war in Ukraine. And if he succeeds in Ukraine, where you have got the Ukrainian people who believe in Europe, they want to be European, and they are willing to actually sacrifice their lives if necessary. They did that in Maidan. So there is a group of people, a nation of 42 million, which of course not fully united, but is now determined to resist Russian domination, needs to be helped to defend itself.
Do you think this is the key battleground? If Putin wins, quote unquote, in Ukraine?
It will have two consequences. One is take the Baltic states, where you also have large Russian populations concentrated, could be the next stop, and that would be a direct threat against NATO. And there Europe will be much less well situated to defend itself. So that's the military threat. And then the other one is the ideological threat, which is the one that I find particularly shocking, because Putin is putting forward an ideology of nationalism.
Is he a fascist?
No, he's something different. There is a lot of resentment in Russia among Russian people for the European Union not being helpful enough when the Soviet system collapsed. It's a resurgent nationalism. Actually, there are some similarities to the interwar period in Germany, where there was a lot of resentment because of the reparations payments.
Well, but the end result of that resentment was Hitler.
Yeah, yeah.
And you think something similar? I mean, what is in Vladimir Putin's head? What does he want to do? Does he want to recreate a kind of Soviet Union? We know he has said that when the Soviet Union disappeared, it was the saddest day of his life. Do you think that's what he has in mind, or is it more trying to bargain with the West, some other things?
Well, one can speculate about Putin.
But you know about speculating.
Well, he does want to recreate the Russian Empire. And he also thinks that the Russians need a Tsar. And so he's rebuilding the Tsarist model. And you have every sign, there's a recent movie where the Tsarist period, a love story where the Tsarist period is in color, and everything afterwards is black and white. So it shows that it's a recreation of the Russian past.
What do you make of, you talked about the European reaction, what about the American reaction? In this article, you're saying, Russia might be helpful on some other international hotspots like Iraq and Syria, or maybe Iran, in exchange for having its way in the so-called near abroad. And you say, probably worryingly so, that Obama could accept that. Do you think the US could say to the Russians, do whatever you want, help us on the other issues?
There's certainly an implicit offer from the Putin side that maybe he could be helpful against ISIS if he was given a free hand in what he calls the near abroad. And it would be a historic mistake for Obama to accept that.
Okay. I want to get quickly to another issue that's been making the news. It's the Ebola epidemic. I know you've been involved. There are some signs that maybe it is now finally coming under control, tentatively so. What do you make of this epidemic and all?
It is a very serious health problem. Because it was neglected and not recognized at the beginning. And it's all a question of time how fast it's brought under control, but it is effectively out of control.
But who is to blame? Do you blame the international community for not reacting quickly enough, maybe because it is essentially located in 3 poor African countries?
Well, certainly the fact that it was not recognized is what is to blame. It started for several months. It grew without people knowing that it's Ebola. Once it was recognized, speed was essential, and that's where my foundation played a role, because we had people like Paul Farmer that understood the issues, and we sent him immediately to Liberia. And you've got the World Bank, Jim Kim, who's really very knowledgeable. And so the World Bank is now, I would say, the main source of support. And the US administration is also engaged. It's a race.
And it can be won.
But it has to, and it will. But how much damage is caused in the meantime, because it spreads awfully fast. So it has to be, the numbers have to peak and then diminish.
Okay, Georges Soros, thank you very much for answering our questions. Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.